4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, what?
Welcome back, everyone, to the Washington Wrestling Network podcast. I am Matt. He is Sam Otto. And Sam, we have a podcast that between you and I, we have been we've been talking about since the entrance of the idea of a podcast is, man, would it be nice to talk to Brent Barnes? And I don't know how we made it happen, but we did. Sam, how are you doing tonight? The weather's going crazy. Computers might blank out here. We got some people ready to listen in, and then the stream might die down. The weather's going crazy right now. But how are you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. I think our producer Trevor and I are probably okay. We're in Linwood, and I think that storm's moving north because it blew through here. I texted you, and we're getting hail, and then all of a sudden you're getting thunder. So hopefully it just keeps moving and power doesn't go out. But yeah, I'm just as jacked as you are to have Brent Barnes on here, dude. Hopefully that power stays on.
Yes, exactly. Well, before we get started, I wanted to say a couple cool things. One is we just hit 1,000 followers on our Facebook page, which was really big. It's taken us a little bit longer to grow our Facebook. A lot of the demographic that has been interacting with our page is primarily through Instagram. But we just surpassed 1,000. And then on Instagram, ever since we dropped the team rankings, all of a sudden that got a lot of some stuff going on. So we're almost at 3K for our Instagram, and we just appreciate everybody. But real quick, Sam, I want you to kind of say, we're going to be at these tournaments this year. We're going to be live streaming some matches, some interviews and stuff like that. Where's the first tournament you're going to be at this year?
Yeah, so well, you guys already know, we've already put this out there that we're going to be at the Tahoma High School for the NIC Evergreen Duel, and we're going to be live streaming that for you guys for the first college duel of the season, and we're super excited about that. And then we'll be releasing a schedule for us moving forward, but we plan on being at least one of us, hopefully two of us, at the Edmonds Invite for the finals of that. Which is I think it's the first week of December. Yeah, so we'll be there, which is a very highly regarded tournament. One of the toughest tournaments in Washington State. You got all the top dogs there in week one wrestling each other. So we want to get there for finals and be doing some interviews for that. And then hopefully popping out to a couple more throughout the season. We haven't confirmed anything yet, but hopefully getting down to Lake Stevens for the Viking Invite. And then obviously we already mentioned this as well. We're going to be down there back in Maple Valley, January 21st for the Tahoma Ording Duel, which will be top dogs in 4A and 2A going at it in a dual meet. So we'll be live streaming that one as well. So more to come on that, but yeah, we have stuff planned. This is just year one of us getting started, but the plan is to get to as much stuff as possible. But yeah, Edmonds Invite will be our first high school event that we're going to be getting down to try and touch base with some of you folks.
And then just to let everybody know, it's kind of a big deal for us, but going to Tahoma and doing what we are going to be doing this year for the NIC duel and then the Tahoma versus Ording duel, we will be live streaming, live commentary, live interviews, and we're trying to pull this off with the Tahoma School District video, production kids in the classrooms and stuff, and they're really eager to help us do this thing. And Coach Feist is going to be on commentary with us for the NIC duel, which I thought was just going to be really cool. And I really do just appreciate everybody's just appreciate the love that everybody's been giving us. And here we go. Coach Feist is already in the chat. Bears in it to win it at the coming invite. Gonna strap a pig head on and storm the shore to pillage the village. nearer style. Okay, Coach Weiss is already on him one, and he should be. But let's bring our illustrious guest on, Coach Barnes. Welcome to the podcast tonight. You're getting stormed in there as well, but luckily we got you here, and we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh yeah, I can hear you guys. Hopefully you're not getting too much echo or anything.
No, okay, I appreciate it.
Great.
That was a pre-podcast thing. That's what he means. But I appreciate you, Coach, and we mentioned this before we got on, but this was a podcast that I thought was going to be really, really tough for us to try to obtain. I haven't seen or heard a lot about Coach Barnes in a little while. I mean, hopefully, if you're fully retired, you're enjoying your retirement, and you should. You deserve it. You've had a long career, and I want to just kind of start this. Like, you began coaching at Lake Stevens High School in 1987. You won your first state title in 1990. And here's the thing, you probably know all these dates right off the top of your head, some of these dates, right? 11 state titles, from 10 of them from 2000 to 2016, 8 top 4 finishes in non-title years, 42 individual state champions, 2 4-time state champions, Burke, your son, and Michael Solar, 185 total state placers. You were at one time ranked top 25 nationally, and you did that 5 different seasons, 32 Wesco team titles, 30 regional titles, 1992 2A Coach of the Year. You coached the Women's World Team for 6 seasons and finally retiring in 2022. Coach, I mean, I know we're going to get to some of the sauce right here on this, but Coach Weiss back here, Barnes is the GOAT, brought his tech DVD to my second year coaching the Bears, trying to figure out how to beat the Vikings. That's hilarious. But Coach, we just want to say, I mean, from us and from the community, the state of Washington, we really thank you and appreciate the immense time that you've spent with all of us. My personal experience with you coaching me, which only happened one time, was at our Wesco All-Star duels. It was me, Parker Burns, Kenny Kubik. I keep forgetting a couple other of them, but you came in and it was kind of, I was like, man, I'm finally being coached by Barnes. Like, what is this going to be like? And I swear you never talked to any of us. I was like, what the heck? I was like, I tried to know the guy. But you know what? When you come in and you have the type of respect that you have, and you walk into a room, you just enjoyed being taught under you. And there were some little bits of time that we got some technique from you. But, as we run down all of those accolades, Coach, do you remember all those? Is it in the back of your mind pretty fairly?
I couldn't tell you. You remember the first one when you said 1990. I remember every face on that team because it was so early on. But before we start, I have to give a shout out to all the wrestlers in my first period class who told me I was going to be on a podcast this morning and reminded me, which is nice. I still teach, so I'm not completely retired. I have a ASC, athletic strength and conditioning class first period that has basketball players, wrestlers, and some baseball players in it. So pretty exciting to be able to have them say they're gonna see me tonight on this big screen. So hopefully I won't let them down. But yeah, the early years you remember, and then the last years, of course. But and I said this when I retired. I don't remember all those stats and didn't know how many. Matter of fact, I forgot what you just said. So that might be old age, but the relationships are what were the most important things, and not just the relationships with the kids in Lake Stevens, but with like the Ottos and the Springers and kids from other schools. And I took Otto Olson to Tri-State a couple times. I got to do that. He was at Everett, and just all the people in our area and around the state. And when I thought about this today, I was thinking about all the coaches, and you become friends. The wrestling's different than basketball, where you're sitting across the court from the other coach, and you're probably giving bad looks and stuff like that. And wrestling, you got to spend a crap load of time together, and you gotta be around each other. And very few few of the people you dislike, because we're all in it together. We're all spending 14, 16 hours a day in a gym, and yeah, so it's cool. Really cool sport.
Yeah, Coach, we want to start off the podcast talking about your early life. This is kind of how we do it with most folks, and I feel like it's totally necessary to start off with you as well. Just about, what was your childhood like? What was your upbringing like? We've got some show prep a little bit here of some quotes from the Seattle Times about you growing up with your dad at Puyallup High School, and what were your first memories like in this sport, and what did that mean to you?
Oh, really vivid. My dad started the wrestling program at Puyallup. He had never wrestled. He was a football player, played at the University of Washington, was a lineman, but he was the head wrestling coach, and he was assistant football coach. So he really took wrestling on and learned it from books and getting together with other coaches around their league. They would have get-togethers. I think they basically would have cocktail parties, is what it was, and they'd show each other moves and stuff. And my dad was not a yeller. He was really he was a lot calmer than I probably was. He was great to have as a dad and be a wrestler. When I was probably 5 years old, the big rivalry was Auburn High School versus Puyallup, two blue collar towns, single high school towns, and they would pack the gym for that 1966, 67. And I was probably 5 years old, 5, 6 years old. And at that time they didn't have like seats for the wrestlers. So they had a mat, and the wrestlers would just sit on the warm-up mat. But they had 2 chairs for the coaches. So they had the 2 chairs on each side, and then the wrestlers just sat on the mats. It was different. And I remember those crowds, how big they were, and the smell of popcorn and all those things about the being in the gym. And at some point in time during that, I would walk over and jump on my dad's lap, and he had no problem. And I'd sit there for a while and hang out. And the wrestlers were always good to me. And
there's a direct quote from the Seattle Times that says, "To this day, I smell the mixture of popcorn, sweat, and polyvinyl mat."
Yeah,
brings back those early recollections.
Oh,
The
yeah.
sound of blowing whistles, coaches and teammates cheering, and the erupting. Like that's what it's all about, right there, man. Like everybody kind of has that smell and that feel of being in a dual meet, and it sounds like that's exactly what you were experiencing from a young age. Is that right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And to think about, you mentioned the Oregon and Tahoma match, and that's the first thing that those sensory things come to my mind. To have that rivalry right down the road is gold. I mean, it's just so important. We had it with Monroe, and some other schools. In the state, we had it with Moses Lake for quite a while. But that closeness to have it right down the road with Monroe, that was really at the peak of our program, when things are really rolling and we were putting big crowds in our gym. I grew up a little bit, getting to see that. And honestly, when I thought about becoming a coach, that's what I thought about what I wanted. I wanted to have that gym packed, and I wanted to have that atmosphere because there's nothing like a really, hotly contested dual meet. It's cool.
Was that what the big driving factor that got you into wrestling? You were like, "Hey, Dad, I want to wrestle," or was your dad the big influence? It's like, "Hey, no, you need to wrestle." Because I know there's 2 sides of the card for a lot of wrestlers. It's like, well, one wants to, but one, as the other side, like me, where it's like, "Oh, you have to," So, what was it like for you?
I don't ever remember my dad actually, tell me to wrestle or, try. I wanted to wrestle from the get-go, so that wasn't a problem. And then I remember probably I was 6 years old, and my parents bought me a singlet, and I wore it to bed every night. I think I have permanent marks on my thighs from elastic. But it was. I wanted to do it really bad, and so that was never. My dad hardly ever coached me. He just kind of let other people do that. And I think he knew already that there was going to be some pressure there with being the coach. at the high school. And even though I didn't go to his high school, by the time I got to high school age, my dad had retired in 1970. I wasn't in high school till 77. And so my dad was already the athletic director. But so that's just kind of his philosophy, he wanted to let somebody else do it. And, regardless of how I ever did, he'd pat me on the back and, say, good job. And, you ran out of time. He told me that a lot when I'd lose. You ran out of time. So he always kind of shaded it in a pretty good light. So, yeah. But, yeah, that was the driving force, like had that dream of having, and when being a coach that won some state titles, my dad never got to do that, but we talked about it a lot, and he talked about at that time Moses Lake was so good, and that was kind of, yeah.
Hey, Coach, how early in your life did you know you wanted to transition into coaching? I mean, just like Sam said, he didn't have a choice that he was going to wrestle. He's the youngest of us, pretty good wrestlers, and there was no choice there. But some people do kind of go through that division in their mind of, do they want to continue what their dad, follow in the same footsteps? When did you decide that, coaching's what you wanted to step into?
Yeah, I think it's always in the back of your mind, right? You think you're going to be a lot of things. You go off to college, and I went through about 6 different career paths, and thinking, well, I was going to be this and that. And then it was kind of like, okay, well, it brings back this story about I believe it was Christmas, and we were all at my parents' house, and they had a huge, great big dining room table, and there's probably 16 people around the table, and out of the blue, Burke's, maybe 6 years old, and he says, yeah, when I grow up, I want to be a professional baseball player, just like Ken Griffey Jr. And my dad blurts it out. He must have had a couple glasses of wine, because he never would say anything. He never told me I needed to wrestle. But he said, oh, get that cockeyed idea out of your head. You're going to be a wrestler. Of course, all the moms and everybody are pissed off. But, my dad was right. I never said anything. I was just kind of smiling on the other end of the table.
Yeah, that leads me into my next question, I guess. Well, we're touching on family here. Is you had a son, right? And goes on to do great things. And how did you take what your dad taught you to being a father and having a son? That I don't know how you approached it, or how did you approach it with Burke when he was a young kid and getting into wrestling and whatnot?
It taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about coaching, and a lot about kids that have dads that are, very involved. Yeah. And I had a lot of kids that had dads that were very involved, and some of them became extremely close friends. But none of them ever came in the wrestling room during the collegiate season. I realized I was as crazy as any parent, right? Wrestling was extremely important to me. I was totally into it, and I wanted the best for him. And I think it was in Butte at Western Regionals, and I'm looking across the mat at the other dad, and I'm like, why in the hell did you bring your kid here? And I'm like mad, like, I want to fight this guy. Come on, man. Let's forget about the kids. Let's you and I just go out. And I was like, and I caught myself like, what in the hell is wrong with me? And I actually went outside. I remember Butte, that old building. I think they had a rodeo in there.
A livestock center there, yeah.
Right. I went outside, and I kind of had a talk with myself, and I had to remind myself that this is not about me, and this is about my kid. And from that point on, I started to change my thought process, but it was a constant reminder of, okay, I need to take a step back here. And I did a lot of things to try to fill my time, from running marathons to half Ironman triathlons. So the whole focus wasn't on Burke. And by the time he got to middle school, I knew we had to do something other than just wrestling because it's basically all we did. He rode to school with me in the morning. I had him in class. We got season tickets for the Seahawks. I wasn't even a football fan at the time, but it was great. It gave us an outlet, and so we tried to do a lot of stuff like that, and not make wrestling just the total focus of every day of our life.
Yeah, well, I mean, inherently, it has to be when you're talking about Brent Barnes. I mean, obviously, it does. Did you struggle a little bit finding, a little bit of other things? I mean, the Seahawks, they're right in town. Mariners, it's easy to go and do, but did you struggle any in the other areas when it came to that?
Well, I had a rule, and the rule was that when we got in the car to drive home from practice, that I would not talk about wrestling unless he brought it up. I think one time I was watching video, and I said, "Hey, come over here," and he was like, "No, I don't want to." And I realized, okay, he's had enough. 2 practices today, and I realized that okay, I needed to be more of a dad at home than a coach, and I really tried hard to make that separation, and especially when he got older, because the pressure for him got built and built and built and built, and it was ridiculous by the time he was a senior in high school, and I knew it, and we wanted to make sure that it didn't break him. And
yeah, you take a big breath right there, because I can tell you're like remembering that. You're like, oh man, we need to just take a big deep breath. Because as anyone could imagine, I mean, as well as he did, being your son and getting to these points, it just inherent pressure. Just like we interviewed Trey Haynes, and we were like, hey, you won state 2 times, and now it's like, you got pressure. I mean, there's no other outcome that could be successful but winning another state title. And I wanted to bring this up. Could you tell me about that? We got a private investigator, Coach, and he's on staff. But can you tell me a little bit about this, Coach?
Oh yeah, the guy in the purple was over at the house just before we got on.
Oh, nice.
My grandson Bryson, and I have him in class first period.
Oh, cool.
He wrestled a little bit last year. He wrestled throughout the season. I don't know if he's going to turn out this year, but he's a great kid, awesome. And he was just getting off work, so he came by and stopped in to chit chat. So
isn't that so? I can't take. Okay, there it is. Isn't that kind of cool? I think it's kind of cool that you're like sitting with him. Now we could talk about the kid's in your class. He's driving, like you said, he's driving. Like, what's going on here? These kids grow up so much. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I had both my grandsons in class last year. My other grandson is on the basketball team. He had a hard time. He had a hard decision. He was a decent wrestler in middle school, and he kind of went back and forth. But his dad is an assistant basketball coach, so he made the right choice. He's also about 6'3", and he's with a few kids that can dunk on the team. So yeah, he probably made the right decision. But it was fun to have him in wrestling, and both my grandsons, my daughter's kids, both of them are basketball players, but they both wrestled in middle school because wrestling. Their dad knew that wrestling was important.
Yes, and as we would all echo that sentiment to any parent or anybody, the wrestling is, in our opinion, the best sport in the world. Teaches you the most life lessons. And then here's the thing: even if you're 6'3", I mean, must be nice, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I understand the decision, and we get it. Go ahead, Sam.
Mean far side cradle, that kid.
Yeah, us short kings would not be able to make it on the basketball court. That's why we're wrestlers, right? Yeah. No, I got one more question for you, Coach, on the family aspect here. Just going back to your dad, he's in the Hall of Fame, and then you got inducted in 2017, and it's the first father-son duo. I just want to let everybody know it's the first father-son duo ever to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And how cool is that? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, that's got to be so cool for you to
I didn't know we were the first, but it is pretty cool. I know that because Burke won and is a national champion and won the Dave Schultz Award. All 3 of them are in Stillwater in the National Hall of Fame for, I was in there for winning a junior college national title, and then my dad got inducted in. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Like my dad was he passed 2 years ago, and was such a great guy, and just so loving and cool, and it's great. I have great memories about him and what he, of course, did for me and the whole bit. And I wasn't easy all the time.
None of us were.
Yeah. Well, and then, I mean, wrestling's tough on its own. So it kind of makes you, it brings out these little spurts of like, hey, I ain't coming over to watch that tape right now. I'm trying to relax. Okay. 2 practices today. Absolutely not doing anything. But then our private investigator got one of these here, Coach.
Oh, yeah.
What can you tell us about this?
I think that might have had something to do with my wife wearing a Tahoma singlet at one point in time. I'm not sure. But I caught her with a Tahoma singlet on, and we had a little blowout. We're still doing okay, but it's kind of hangs over our marriage.
I think that's one of the coolest photos. She want to come on the podcast too? She totally can come.
You want to come over here and explain yourself about the singlet from Tahoma? No, she said no, thank you.
No, thank you.
Well, dang it, because I was kind of hoping we would get that, but that's okay, no big deal. But let's get into kind of a little bit of the coaching at Lake Stevens. So, can you kind of talk a little bit about the early years and what it was like to kind of get it going? For me specifically, and I know Sam too. We're back coaching. I'm coaching at Everett High, my alma mater. Brian Elliott has left a vacancy open, and it's really awesome. I feel very blessed to be able to go back to the school that I love so much and coach these kids. And last year we had a wonderful, wonderful time, but we're still struggling and learning what it takes to build a program, do it the right way. Were you faced with some of those exact same things once you got to Lake Stevens, and how did you deal with it?
Well, it's funny. I had a job in Tacoma at Wilson High School, and I had a team meeting. One of the kitchens, I don't know if Tim has an older brother, but one of the kitchens went there. And I remember asking about him because he wasn't at the team meeting, and I think he was working at one of the restaurants down the waterfront. So I definitely thought, wow, this is the best restaurant at the school. We're losing him. But anyway, I had this job in Tacoma, and had my classes. I was going to teach at the junior high, and 2 weeks later they pulled me and said, we have to take the job back. Somebody grieved it, blah, 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 in the union. And so I called Lake Stevens that night and said, hey, I got a job in Tacoma. I need to know about this job in Lake Stevens. And they said, come up. Thank God they didn't make any phone calls. So they said, come up, and I, of course, got the job that night. And what a great deal. It really was a blessing to end up in Lake Stevens rather than have to drive into Tacoma every day. But when I got a job, I had already coached a year at North Idaho College, and I had coached a year at Bethel High School as an assistant to Paul Greeley, who had won a couple state titles and had wrestled for my dad. And Paul was a great guy and really a character, and I learned so much from him, not necessarily technically, but how to deal with kids and how to run a program and all those things. So that year was invaluable for me. So when I got to Lake Stevens, I kind of had an idea what I needed to do. I had a meeting with the former coach, Steve Anderson, who is in the Hall of Fame and helped start Matt Classic. And I asked him, what's it going to take to win a state title at Lake Stevens High School? And he goes, I don't think you can do it. And I was like, really? Okay. And that kind of stuck with me. I kind of thought, you know what? I thought it had all the ingredients: gritty kids, single small town school, 2 middle schools that fed into, well, at that time we had 1 middle school that fed right into the high school. And then, so the best thing I ever did was to about second weekend, I went down to the middle school, and because I was looking for assistant coaches, I didn't have anybody to coach with me, and I got a hold of this guy named Dean Witt. And
This guy, yeah, we all know.
yeah, and he was a counselor, and he was a counselor, but in his office was a great big Raiders sign. So I'm like, this is the kind of counselor that I want. And he was great, and he was a little bit he had a little chip on his shoulder because the other coach didn't really value him, the previous coach, and I think he was one of those guys that if you brought in and you gave him, the much deserved pat on the back, he was going to do anything, and that's exactly what he did and has done. And we wouldn't have had the success without him. He was instrumental in everything we did, and really, really good with kids. Really good with kids. So, and he's the guy, like. When all I was worried about was, the varsity guys and the kids that were going to go to state, he was worried about everybody else and taking care of everything else. So he was that guy. So that was the start. And I knew that, I didn't know really how it was going to go because I didn't know much about high school AA wrestling in the state of Washington, but I knew that the athletes that we got that year, I happened to be fortunate enough to be able to coach. I knew that they were a great core and we were going to be able to do something special with them. If you remember the Stony Myers, were you guys old enough to remember Stony Myers? And I'm trying to think of the other kid that wrestled him from Ferndale or somewhere. But anyway, it was probably one of the greatest high school matches I've seen in the state of Washington at Matt Classic. Well, that was the year that we won state in '90, and we barely edged out a team from Hudson Bay that was really good and had some extremely good kids on that team. But to back up just a little bit about that group, I had like 6 very good athletes. One of them was Richie Chambers, who went on to be All Pac-10 linebacker for the Huskies. And, nice. Can you imagine, we have a great football team at Lake Stevens. I look at some of those kids and, man, I would like to have them. You can become a really good coach with athletes like that. Yeah. So I was really fortunate, and Richie loved the sport and put time into it, and it was big. And I think when he was in college, he was 230 and 6'3" and ran a 4.6 40. So he was, yeah.
I think I remember seeing his picture up on the wall at the high school. Growing up. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Hey, Coach, just before we get on, you got a couple of your Lake Stevens guys in the chats here demanding shout outs.
Yeah.
Cohen Mattern. I don't know if I say that is that the right way to say his name? Because okay, Cohen, he wants a shout out. We're going to give him a shout out. Go ahead.
He may be the nicest kid I ever coached. And I've coached a lot. Michael Solar's right up there. But Cohen Mattern is one of the nicest human beings I ever coached.
Wow.
And our hand in class.
Gentle giant.
What a nice shout out you get, my friend. Yeah. He was harping on us a little bit. And this will actually be okay to bring a comment back from earlier that I didn't notice it, but T-Buzz says right here, love you guys, but you're too effing low on Arlington this year. You'll see. A-Town. And we got it. I think we got Arlington top 6.
Yeah, we got plenty of Arlington.
And there. Lake isn't in our top 10, I don't think. And Cohen was the one. Yet. Nice guy, apparently, but he called us out. He was the first person to call us out on it. And I'm not saying you guys aren't going to be well, but thank you for finding this. Juanita Wrestling, which we could probably guess who this is. Stony Myers versus Jason Muggy.
Yeah,
best finals ever.
Thank you so much for that. Juanita _wrestling. Go follow them on IG. We really appreciate that. Go ahead.
Speaking of message boards and rankings and that kind of thing, I had one of the greatest coaching decisions ever. And Sam, you might know this story, right? About the Quebecs. And
Probably, yeah.
the whole season, it was the year that Tony Quebec, he had came to Lake Stevens, and he had never won a state title, and there was this guy, I believe my handle was Northern Man, and he was just egged this situation, and Keith, his dad, who was great friends of ours, and and nobody knew who I was until the banquet. I revealed that I was Northern Man, and they about fell off their chairs. Keith was so upset, like, I can't believe you did that to me. But yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, that's what the people
hey, the Quebecs, right? Once we get into that era, oh, look at this, Cohen. This is real sweet right here. Cohen, keep it up, bud. You're doing well, and we appreciate you. Sam, continue on here. So look, we locking in. That's the kids like to say they're locking in. Coach Barnes, you think that Lake can lock in this year and place top 10?
Well, I think so, and I wouldn't argue with Cohen. He's a lot bigger and stronger than me, so whatever he says goes.
Yeah, he is bigger, but not a basketball player, apparently. You could be big, but you could also wrestle. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Coach, I got to ask you, what'd you learn over the years, as you started gaining success? Once you got into the late 90s, early 2000s, you start winning some state titles, getting in the top 4 year after year. How did you preach that to the team, and what was your coaching? How did your coaching philosophy change as you kind of started gaining some steam as a successful program and turning into like a dynasty?
Yeah, I think one thing is you have to constantly improve. You have to get better every year. It's a craft, good coaching is a craft, and you have to constantly try to find a way you have some core values, right, that you don't. Wrestling is always going to be about position and motion and those kind of things, and that's important. But you have to grow with the sport, and you have to, if you don't change, you don't get better. You gotta get better. And so that was one of our goals. As we worked really hard. One of the reasons why we traveled so much too, not just for the kids to get good matches, but for the coaches to see good wrestling and see other programs and see the St. Edwards and the Blair Academies, and see what they do and how they operate, and what we can take from them. So that was I think one thing that we did a really good job of, is we kept getting better and better, and not just learning moves, but being able to put it in a context where you could really help your individuals on your team. And in that way, I think as we moved ahead through that time, we got better athletes. And when you get better athletes, you have a responsibility to help them. And one shoe doesn't fit every kid in your room. And so you individualize a little bit more, and you really focus on certain things to get individuals. We always talked about it, making sure we find the right box for every kid, and some boxes are smaller than others, but, to keep that kid in a certain, to give him a certain style that's going to make him successful. And that's one thing that we really worked on. And that's hard to do when you first start out, and you have a bunch of kids that, may have never wrestled before, or have wrestled very little, or don't understand what you really want. And so you're feeding them a program, you're almost a canned system of things that you want to develop before you can, actually get out and run. You got to be able to walk. And so it's a lot different. Those groups are a lot different. That being said, I think what I really, really enjoyed about coaching was building the team. Thinking in the off season, I got this spot that I got to fill. No matter how bad we were or how good we were, there was always going to be that one or two, 3, 4 spots that you knew where are we going to get somebody to fill this? And that was the great thing about having Dean and Andy, because those guys would beat Hulls. We need a 106 pounder, 103 pounder at the time. We need and finding people, and then Dean would say, "Oh yeah, I got a kid coming up. You should see this kid." And he's huge. And then And then I'd see him. I'm like, what is this kid? You gotta be kidding me! This chubby little kid. Yeah. So
Yeah,
he was great at building him up, but
I think you must have, or Coach Weiss must have you on speed dial, because we had him on like 5 episodes ago, and he talked about a lot of the same stuff that you're just talking about there. But one thing we didn't really talk to him about too much is yeah, he's a great coach. Yeah, I'm sure he's learned a lot from you. In fact, I got your number from him. But,
oh, geez.
Yeah.
So
Sam came a calling, and it was not welcomed.
Yeah, I would have found a way anyways, but that was the easy way. But one thing we didn't really talk about with Coach Weiss was getting plugged into the middle schools. You had Dean there at a middle school, and I think you had Andy at another, right? You had both assistants there coaching at middle schools as well. I feel like that was a pretty big deal for you guys, right? And talk a little bit about that and how that played into the building of your program.
Well, and it's funny because when in those years, so we won it in 1990, but then we didn't win it again until 2000, I think.
Yeah.
And we took second in 95 or 96, but we had a little dry spell from 1990 to about 95, and but you have to have something to hang. Those times are coming. You can see them coming when you're looking at your freshmen and you hang out with your middle school program, and you know that you're going to have some things that you're going to have to work on, and but there was always something to shoot for, like, okay, if we can't win state, we're going to win Wesco. We're going to try to win the dual, Washington duels or whatever. There's always something out there, some goal that would force us to fill that lineup and get more kids in. And I think it's, like one kid, we were looking for a 106 pounder, 103 pounder. And we pull Lester Brown out of the hallway. And he had never wrestled, and he races in the state tournament, so it can be done. Ahmad Shamsa, another kid, I had him in class. He had no clue. I talked him into wrestling, and I talked about the Russians and about the Dagestanis, and how wrestling and their religion and all that goes in together, and they're the greatest wrestlers in the world. And he was like, his eyes were like this big. He's from Palestine, and just the nicest. Well, he might be nicer than Cohen Mattern, but same thing. He just, like, we pulled him out of the hallway. He had never seen a wrestling match until his sophomore year in high school. So it does help to beat the streets, or get in the hallways and get those kids. Even today, when we think, oh, you don't have a chance because you haven't done you haven't been in the club. No, I don't think that's true. I think we can still really get a lot of mileage and do a lot of good and really help out these kids that.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, because wrestling is not the first choice of just the modern parent, right? In general, right? Like we're sent. My kids are playing soccer, right? My wife has never been around the wrestling scene. She's like, oh, they're gonna play soccer, they're gonna do a little bit of basketball, whatnot, and all of a sudden, there's these unsung athletes that are just hanging out. And so that boots on the ground recruiting that you can do in high school, getting out to your middle schools, getting out to your high school, sounds like you guys did a really good job. Well, I know you guys did a really good job with that. And you found those. Yeah,
they did. That was a really good job. Dean was amazing because he would have huge numbers, and then he would push Andy. I don't know if Andy ever beat Dean in a dual meet. I don't think Dean would have cheated to win. So I don't think Andy wasn't willing to cheat.
We got a live stream broadcast one of those, like Stevens in middle school versus whoever was a Cavallero or whatever.
I actually want to talk about Dean, because he's still there. Andy's still there. All the guys are there, and we try to interconnect with you guys the best we can. We're actually dueling you guys this year for the first time in quite some time, which will be great. But Dean, we get on the phone with each other. He goes, Andy's like getting annoyed by you, but he just told me, call Matt Beck, figure it out. And then Dean goes, oh, anything for Matt Beck. And I was just like, oh, Dean's just such a nice guy, but he'll cheat to win for sure. Absolutely. And I love that guy. Coach Feist just had a comment here. He said, I watched Brent more than any other coach for the first 7 years of my coaching career, watched lots of Viking wrestling film, but then started watching Brent coach his kids, trying to understand the magic. Coach, when you had that 10 years where you were in between state championships, did you change how you approached it? Did you wait for kids to come around that were, how did you take that 10 years where you knew like, hey, I get it that you were trying to win Wesco titles and trying to win duels, but building the program that came out of that 10 years lasted forever. I mean, it's a lifetime. I mean, so what did you say to yourself and to your coaches, like, hey, we need to do this, or was it anything? I mean, what did you just stay the course? I mean, what was it? Well,
I was really fortunate. When we came into the early 2000s, that I had Ron Bessemer to not only watch and learn from it, and I picked his brain. I drive him crazy asking him questions. Ron Bessemer, the old coach at Moses.
I would assume most of the people watching this might know who we're talking about. But
so then I got the opportunity to coach against him, and I learned so much from him. And you learn from the people you compete against. You learn from the older coaches, and he wasn't the only one, but he was the one that sticks out the most because he would figure you out. And a great story, Theo White, who Sam knows, Theo beats this kid from Moses Lake at we wrestled in the duel. And I think he might have teched him. The kid says to Theo in the duel, I'll see you in the finals tomorrow at Tri-State, or, this weekend. Theo kind of laughs. The next 2 nights later, he wrestles him in the finals at Tri-State. And Theo beats him, but it's just a regular decision. Mm-hmm. We see him again in the duel meet in the Washington duels at the end of the year, and the kid beats Theo by 1 point. But that had a lot to do with the kid, but it also had a ton to do with Ron Bessemer and the way that he would just start taking things away from you. And so fast forward a few years, Burke has to wrestle Ariel Garza in the finals, and they're both freshmen. And he's already wrestled Ariel's brother 3 times that year. And so they have a ton of video, and I knew exactly. And I was so worried about like them just taking away the different things that Burke does. And I said, I started to say something. I said, Burke, I want you, and he goes, Dad, I got it. So I couldn't even coach him. I was gonna say you got to mix it up or something. And in the first 10, 20 seconds of match, he underhooks Ariel and he knee taps him to his back and almost pins him. And I don't believe he had done that one time during the regular season.
Oh wow! Do you think he knew what you think, or?
No, I think he probably just thought, I got this. I know who knows, but he must have known that he had to change it up a little bit. He was pretty smart wrestler that way.
Hey, Coach, you mentioned moves, and I'd be remiss because I got this on my list, not on the show sheet that we have, but the spiral ride, okay, which was, just the epitome of Lake Stevens top wrestling still today. Elbow pass, right? Offense.
Elbow pass was the
in the neutral, right?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? When did you find out that we were just going to be a team that spiral rides? What happened? When did that happen?
Early on, we started spiral riding. I worked a lot in North Idaho college camps, and we would have guys run through there all different. Also, I met a ton of people. That's how I got to coach the women's team, because that's where I met Terry Steiner. But we had a ton of people come through, And the one thing I liked about spiral ride, I never did it, but I liked that it got you off your knees and got you going forward. And I was thinking when we taught it, well, I had Dean teach it at the middle school because I thought this is perfect. We get kids going forward, we get them off their knees, we keep them behind their opponent's arms. It's easy. It's a great, like 30-second offense thing from top when you're in overtime. You're behind the arms. You're never outside of them. You're following. You can lock up and lift and return. And so in that respect, that's just technically that's why I like that as a building block. You can open somebody up, but you can throw a leg in. Okay, now we go to the next level, and now we're into leg rights, or you can wrist roll and break them down and go into bars and things like that. So it just led to a lot of stuff that there was a great starting point for us. But it became one of those things, and it's something that we taught at the middle school level and from early on. And
then what about elbow pass from neutral? I mean, that was something that I don't know that a lot of people were teaching it, but it felt like when I started noticing you guys using it a lot, just like you had mentioned, we watch other coaches, we kind of learn. Well, I'm a junior in high school and I'm seeing, a lot of these elbow passes. Then I try it in the room. I'm like, man, I must not be moving right for this, and it is definitely a feel kind of a thing, but where'd you get that from?
I think, I don't think I know that it's not about the elbow pass. It's about the fact that 90% of the ties from neutral in high school wrestling are collar ties, right? It's the first tie that most coaches, we're going to round those cage and get up in here. We're going to put a collar tie. We're going to pull on their neck. We're going to, so collar tie was everybody goes to it. Right, so you got to be able to score off an elbow. You have to be able to score off an elbow, but you don't have to be athletic, and you don't have to be super explosive to be able to pass an elbow and chase a single leg. And then it also sets up other things once that happens, and it makes the person think twice about putting a collar tie on you. But so we went through a period of time where everybody wanted to wrestle like an Iowa Hawkeye, right? You're gonna pull on their head and neck, and you're gonna try to punch underhooks and those kind of things. And so you have to be able to hand fight, and you have to be able to deal with that stuff in the room. So I think it just came out of that mostly. But yeah, we got a lot of mileage out of it, and we got a lot of mileage because everybody wants to, collar tie.
Hey, Coach, before we continue on here, one of the greats, Brady Mass, coach of the Cedar Woolley team, is here. Appreciate you. Ahmad is here, apparently. Cohen, elbow pass my way through a state title.
It's still going.
That's awesome.
Nice.
And then Jacob Christensen, elbow pass my way through sophomore. These guys. Dude,
that's funny because I literally every time I wrestled a Lake Stevens guy, I got elbow pass like no other, dude. I was wrestling shit.
Always afraid of you headlocking us. So
head and arms my way through.
Exactly. Yeah.
Look at my elbows. It's going this way. Okay, but before, I appreciate all these IG comments, but guys, the IG is going to kick us off here. Please go to our YouTube, our Facebook, where we're going to continue the stream. We'd love to see you guys get into that and comment from there. I got to end the live video, which I'm doing now. Please follow the links to get to us now. But thank you for tuning in. And then, Coach, we're going to continue the second half of this podcast now exclusively on Facebook and YouTube. Sam, go ahead.
Let's touch on a little bit of your world team experience, Coach. This was after I got done wrestling that you decided to do this, and I kind of had to dig deep into the archives before we had you on, and didn't realize how much success and fun you had with doing the women's team. Talk about it. Talk about your experience with it. Talk about coaching women's wrestling on the world team scale. I know you traveled all over doing it. Go ahead.
Coach Pete De La Rosa.
Yeah.
We're almost to Halloween, Coach. We're almost to Halloween. So
That must be an inside joke.
Yeah, that's a big inside joke. But so I told you that I had met Terry Steiner, and we had, become good friends and stayed in touch. And when he became the women's coach, he brought in people that he liked and felt comfortable with, and to work with the women. And the first trip I ever took was to Sweden, and I had to get time off of school. So and luckily my superintendent at that time gave me a week off and to go to Sweden, the clip-on tournament. They still go to it. It's a good tournament, and but it's right at the end of February, right after the state tournament. And on that team that we took were quite a Clarissa Chen wrestled in that tournament, among a whole bunch of others. And it was just a great experience. It's different. It's different than like building a program and coaching at the high school level.
Right.
You have to be quick on your feet to create some relationships with these people so they trust you. At that time, the women weren't getting good coaching, and so they were really responsive. The women's coaching has changed so much since then. So I went from that in 2004 to the last one, I think, was 2018. And one of those years I coached the cadet girls at the World Championships. And it seemed like every girl had their own individual coach and or mom that was there. And so the culture had changed a lot. And it was tough. But I also, during those years, I not only went on the trips and coached, but a couple times I had to set up and do the training camps and run the the training camp for the national team for like the juniors and the 1 year for the junior world group. And so that was interesting, just going to McKendree University.
Oh, yeah.
And the bad thing about that was they have a wrestling room, and I don't know if either of you have ever been to McKendree. It's really nice. It's kind of in a strip mall, but the wrestling room's beautiful, and they have their national championships up on the wall. And there's the 133-pound national champion is the guy that beat Burke in the finals his junior year. So
no.
Twice a day when I'd come to practice, I'd have to look at this. Burke was up on him 6-0 and got caught in a scramble and pinned. And every time I walked into that wrestling room for that whole 7 days, I had to relive that match. Anyway, but so I got to run some camps and do that kind of thing, and then I got to go to some major camps, like the training center, and watch great technique. And learn things, and coaching the women was a lot different than coaching my high school kids. And so it makes you grow as a coach, makes you improve. Going to the World Championships is interesting in itself. What an experience. And, you're in the finals of the World Championships, and you have a decision to make to throw the block and maybe give up a point and give up the match, or maybe, who knows what decision they're gonna make, and so that's nerve-wracking. And I was able to do that one time, and we fortunately won, and our girl was a world champion, so it was cool.
Which girl was the world champion for you?
The girl from Hawaii.
She's watching, by the way. No,
Yeah.
just joking.
She's really good in jiu-jitsu too. Great. She was really good in judo. Oh God, I can't remember.
We'll have Trevor look it up for you.
Our private informant needs to try his best to look this up.
Yeah.
Okay. But Coach, I thought this might be a good time to kind of surprise you here. I don't know if you saw, but we're going to bring on Kai Van Leuven, one of your guys from Lake Stevens. Yeah. And, Kai was in our era of wrestling. Well, me, Sam, and Kai kind of represent three little separate eras of wrestling. But I just asked Kai, hey, Kai, you want to come on, man? And he told me, he's like, yeah, let me get my studio. I'm like, you got a studio? This guy's got a studio.
Yeah.
He already knew exactly what was going on. But welcome to the podcast, Kai Van Leuven. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on, you guys.
Wow, he's got a radio voice. Like, this guy should be on radio. Kai, talk about Coach Barnes. Was he tough? Let's just, hey, right in front of him, tell me about it. Was he tough? What did you know most about his coaching style here?
Oh, I knew what the focus was, man. We were going to win. I mean, he's a winner. He's just built that way to develop champions. And yeah, it was a great experience wrestling for him, and just being a part of the community that he built. And we knew that we were going to train, that it was going to be really, really hard, but it was going to be worth it. And I had a ton of fun wrestling at Lake Stevens. It was really, really challenging. He's Coach Barnes to me. I've never called him Brent once, even as a 36-year-old man. He is still Coach Barnes, and yeah, I just loved being in the room with him. Last time we talked, he was here in Hawaii, and I was in Washington. So yeah, so it's kind of cool that we get to chat a little bit.
Hey, Coach, how come I'm just gonna address the elephant in the room? How come Kai wasn't on your nicest wrestler list? Like, he's right here. Can you speak to that? Or?
To be honest, he cried too much in practice. So there
we go.
No, but also a guy that had a major league elbow pass. Is that true?
Yeah, it was decent. I was going to make that comment. I was going to say I was just way too emotional, probably, to be nice. So
you and Sam both, bunch of criers, dude. It's crazy.
In his senior year, the lights, something changed. He totally transformed himself. I had nothing to do with it. But yeah, we had some lumps in there before that, or he did. It didn't really bother me, but it was frustrating because I knew that he had a lot of talent, and he had everything he needed. He worked really hard. He was talented. He cared. All these things, but he just couldn't get past himself until he finally did get past himself, and it was fun.
Let's be honest. I was a choker 3 years in a row. And then Coach Barnes, okay, but I just want to say this. He poured in time into me when I had sucked 3 years in a row. He came in every single morning and worked out with me and tried to develop me as an athlete when that was not proven 3 years in a row. I mean, I had done terrible at the state tournament. So, I think I owe a lot to him that he believed in me at that time,
Hey, Coach Barnes, can we actually talk about that since Kai's going to sit in for a second here? What do you think it is about a wrestler getting all the way, knowing that he's really good, and then we just don't perform well at the state tournament? Do you think that there's do they get extra nervous, or do you think they just don't believe in themselves? I mean, is it a combo of all of it?
Yeah, a combination of all of it. Self-doubt. Yeah, I mean, isn't it so important? I mean, you hear this all the time now, right? To focus on the we're just, hear football coaches. Yeah, we're just going through the process. I heard it tonight on the news with Seahawks coach. But and it's so true to be able to stay in the moment and focus on the task at hand. And Kai's heard all this stuff, but it is true. And we're all built a little differently. I was definitely one of those guys that, if you want to look at it from the fight or flight, perspective, I was a flight guy. I can remember standing in the tunnel at state finals my senior year and thinking, man, it'd be nice to be at home on the couch, like watching TV or something instead of here. And I pretty much knew I was going to kick the kid's ass, but I still, I was so nervous and worried about failure, and if you can get kids past just the worry about failure. Burke, on the other hand, classic fight. That's, take him to Fargo, and he would want to fight everybody. I was constantly putting out fires. Like, why are you in a fight with the guy, the coach from Ohio? Well, he was talking crap about Tommy.
I've heard that about Burke. I've heard that a little bit.
he was talking crap about Tommy Owen. And then we were talking to friends that way. Okay, right? But so he is my only wrestler to get actually kicked out of the Tacoma Dome before the medal ceremony after he won state his freshman year in high school.
Hey, Kai, what is a very like fond memory you had about being, I know it's tough to ask you to pick one out, but let's talk about Barnes specifically, where maybe let's talk about a time where you just felt like you were really down and what he did to kind of bring you back.
Who's that? Oh, me?
Or just Kai. I was talking to Kai.
Well, I mean, as Coach Barnes knows, and as a lot of people know, I mean, I'm a very emotional guy, and there were a lot of times sitting in his office and trying to kind of process a lot of those feelings that I had when I was trying to compete and trying to, there's a lot of different pressures that you feel, and I always felt like Coach Barnes tried to put those pressures in perspective of really what they were. It took a long time for me to. Coach Barnes and I were coaching together a few years ago, his last year coaching. And he said, you can teach somebody how to wrestle, but when they go out on the mat, sometimes you feel like all that goes out the window. You can teach them and do it. And I think about my time at Lake Stevens, those first 3 years in high school. I mean, he kept kind of saying, hey, Kai, your identity, your like how people view you, all these things, they aren't your, like wrestling is not your identity. And then it took all that time of me just maybe putting too much pressure on myself where I finally understood what he was saying and was able to just say, hey, this is just like, let's just let it rip, let's go out and wrestle. And so I think I appreciate that persistence, that he kind of had with me as a wrestler, and kind of, I mean, my problems were not physical. They were, how can I mentally, be a decent wrestler who's prepared. And so I appreciate that. Like, I appreciate me sitting in his office with him and just talking and talking about wrestling and really what it is, and not putting too much pressure on myself.
And then, Coach Barnes, like, what is it like? I mean, now you got a pupil right in front of you here. What's it like to deal with a Kai Van Leuven, and then you got a Kelly Kubik over here, and then you got a Mitch Tipton over here, and a Chris Monson over here, and they all got different personalities and stuff like that. And it's Tessia Alo is the name we were looking for with the world.
Yeah, Alo. Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. She's awesome. Incredible athlete. But yeah, I think, all athletes are different, right? But I think we're all on some kind of spectrum as far as how we deal with nerves and competition anxiety, all that stuff. I think that's something we don't talk enough about. And as a coach, probably, and you can ask Andy and Dean and anybody who's coached with me, my fault is I believe every kid could probably be a state champion. Mm-hmm. And I will talk myself in. I would talk my team. We could be terrible. I could talk myself into thinking we have a chance. I'm kind of like the dumb guys. Like, we got a chance. If this kid does this and this, but I always believe that, and maybe that there's some ego involved in that or what. But I always believe that we could turn this kid into a pretty good wrestler. And I probably looked at it more from just a physical standpoint. And I wrestled some kids that mentally, it was like warfare every day. And not just Kai. Clint Osborne, the strongest kid I've ever coached. It was, honestly, he would let the 158-pounder, he's a heavyweight state champion, and Ricky Bargreen would be kicking his ass every day in practice, and he would leave and cry. And I would just have to give myself a talk, like, okay, I'm going to mental warfare today with Clint, and I got to prepare myself. And but when it's all said and done, and they get through that, and Kai gets his arm raised, it's all worth it, And it is true. You have to let them know that is not the most important thing. And everything that they're worried about is just a mirage anyway, something that they've created in their mind, that they put all this, emphasis on this winning and losing or becoming this one thing. And it's so funny when it happens. Most kids say, "Oh, I thought I'd feel a lot different than I do." No, you're still the same person, and that's the point. You just got a different color, medal around your neck. So I think it's really important that we talk about that a lot, and that's why you have to have a good relationship with your wrestlers and as a coach, and you have to build those relationships and find out what makes them tick, what buttons to push or when to when to back off. And for Kai, probably when his senior year, I backed off quite a bit because not only did he start to have it figured out, but I knew that the more that, the more I said, the more pressure that there was going to be, and that probably didn't do any good.
Hey, Kai, real quick for you. We had talked about how Burke had just had the pressure coming up, right? And that makes sense. His dad's a coach, legendary coach, right? But did you feel pressure being at Lake, like that everybody was so good that you had to live up to that?
Yeah, I think I'm the youngest of 4, and my family moved to Lake Stevens so that I could wrestle there. Mm-hmm. And I'm the type of guy where I'll be at every practice. So there is this investment, that I put in as far as time and effort and all those things. And I have a lot of match anxiety. I have a lot of anxiety in general. I mean, that's just the way I'm wired. And so I don't think it was as external. I think it was a lot of internal and me just saying, gosh, I'm putting so much of this on me. And, I'm more worried about what Barnes thinks of me than probably Barnes, Coach.
Hey,
Barnes
I went through that a little bit. I mean, Barnes just has like a thing about him. He walks in a room and you're like, it's like you're in trouble. You know what I mean? It's like, are you in trouble? I don't know, dude. I don't know. And then he does, you know what I mean? He didn't talk to me. Kai, I want to tell you though, when you were a senior, it's fun to hear that you did release a little bit, because I remember you as a senior, man. You were just bouncing around. You had your long hair, I believe, and you were just a really fun wrestler to watch. And I appreciate have been friends with you for so long, or just to know and see that you're doing well. And I appreciate you for coming on the podcast. The last thing, I would just give you the floor. You could just talk to Barnes before we let you go.
Yeah, well, I mean, Coach Barnes and I talk, so we call each other and have tons of conversations. Sat next to each other at the state tournament this year, so we have that type of relationship. He knows that it will take me, the kind of mushy person that I am, but he knows that I love him and that I care about him. Yeah, and it's not just a wrestling thing, but I appreciate. Like I've coached, I've taken a break over the last 2 years, but I coach and you realize like it's a sacrifice. Yeah. Like you're putting things that you could be doing on the back burner to try to help like build people up and help people grow. And so that's what I appreciate most is the time that Coach Barnes put in to me. And he could have been doing other things, and so I love you. I care about you. I love that you are, as you say, a student of the sport, that you are always, trying to learn and understand what was going on. I'm renovating my house here in Hawaii, and I got really frustrated one day. And I wrote on the wall in Sharpie, it's covered up now. I put a panel over it. I wrote on the wall, trust the process. And that's a very Lake Stevens thing. Trust the process. Just go in every day and trust that you're going to get better. And so that was kind of my marching orders as I was, doing this house solo, trying to remodel it, is just trust every day that I can get better and better. And so I appreciate Coach Barnes for, teaching me that lesson.
Coach, anything for Kai?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words. I think about Kai too. You know, he had an older brother that wrestled for me for 1 year, and a little bit different mental makeup. Great athlete, incredible athlete, physical, and but he was kind of just, you know, he was pretty relaxed about it. And but I think when you have an older brother, especially when he's successful, it does put a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah, Sam, isn't that something you can?
Yeah. Well, and you look at, and for like Kai, it was like, oh, my brother moves here 1 year and he goes and he places third in state. And I'm sure he's thinking about this as a junior and a sophomore, you know, what's it going to take? And, you know, internalize all that. But like he said, he did. I mean, he did trust the process. I think he took a lot of pride of where he was at and what room he was in and how he did things. And I think by the time he got to be a senior, he realized, like, man, I put a lot of work into this and I'm pretty good. And so I think it just clicked at the right time.
Well, Kai, we appreciate you for coming on, man. I'll leave you in the backstage for now if you want to stick around, or you could just tune in on your phone. But thank you so much for joining us, dude. Really appreciate that.
Love you, Kai.
No problem, guys.
See you, buddy.
All right, Coach, back to you. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I feel like we still got so much to uncover. But
yeah, we knew this was going to happen.
Yeah, I know this. I knew it too. Do we have more of your time, Coach? Or
yeah.
Okay. Well, you get the wife back over here. We asked about the Tahoma thing. That's all we need to know. But you talked about Dean With. Can you give us a little bit about Andy Knutson? We got Andy on the phone, and he said, "Hey, you know, the things that he was very intense. Practices were intense. And I think at the level you guys were, it has to be. But can you talk about the help from not just Dean With, but also your assistant for many years, Andy Knutson?"
Yeah, another great deal. You know, he wrestled for me. His senior year, he was the day before the first match. And that first match, so that was my second year of coaching at Lake Stevens, and we were wrestling that night Marysville Pilchuck. They were ranked #1 in the state. They had Boyd Ballard and
Izzy Silva.
Yeah, and well, not yet.
Oh, Adam France.
Yeah, Adam France was there. Gary Witherspoon. It was loaded. And,
Jeez, man.
And
I'm a historian.
Yeah, Andy was driving and got hit by a car, T-boned, and had a lap belt on, and it severed his intestine against his spine. And he was in the hospital. He was our team captain, and he came back a month later, which is crazy because he was 129 pound was a weight class, and he had been cutting to get to that weight, but then for the rest of the year, he basically just walked up and got on the scale. And he is incredible. But people don't really realize about Andy is how physically tough he is. He's just really, really tough physically.
He seems like a little weak kind of guy myself. You know, I'm just joking.
I've watched him get hit with a ski in the ear, you know, water ski, and have blood draining down his ear. And I said, "Doesn't that hurt?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, it hurts really bad." Like, yeah, it hurts really bad, but I'm not going to stop smiling. He's and just coming back from that, he showed you so much of who he is and his integrity and how, you know, what a worker he is and how loyal he is. And I think that's the deal about Andy is he's been such a loyal guy, and he's doing the same thing for Derek. You know, you have to have people like that. And people probably thought, well, okay, Andy's the good cop and I was the bad cop. And that's true to a certain extent. But when Andy also knew, Burke was telling a story about Andy locking him in the sauna back here in my backyard when he was a freshman in high school. And Andy also had said some of that too. You know, he could, you know,
Andy could be bad cop.
Be the bad cop, yeah. So I was really fortunate to have him, and he was in school. He taught. He's around. You know, he's been a part of our family, and really.
Well, to add to that, Coach, and I'm sorry, Sam, to cut you off, but I was going to lead that into Derek, who is now the coach at Lake Stevens and taking over for you there. can you talk a little bit about Derek and how, I mean, obviously there's a point in time where you had to walk away, or, you know, it's just getting to that point. And Derek, can we talk about why he was the guy?
It's, you know, it's unusual in this day and age. You can get a guy that's a teacher and a coach in school. And so he had great teaching credentials. He had coached with us before. We knew a lot about him and what he was all about. And he's a very good guy. Number one, I mean, that's kind of the bottom line, right? You know, you got to be a good human being, and Derek's an awesome human being. He's also a guy that loves wrestling. He's an encyclopedia of technique. He went to Boise State and was part of the wrestling team there, and has seen a lot and experienced a lot. I think any of us who go off to college, you know, we just get that master's degree in coaching, and are able to have this broad, you know, idea of what the sport's all about. And so that's really good. And I think he has a really good philosophy. He's good to kids, and kids like him. So yeah, we were really fortunate.
What about you and what you're doing right now? I know you're still teaching, coach, and
Yes.
I'm going to keep calling you coach, even though you're not coaching, but you're still teaching at the school, and you got a couple years left. And you know, are you in an advisory role? I've been around the West Coast scene. I haven't seen you, and I'm hoping to see you. Where are you at? What are you doing right now? Where's Coach Barnes on the wrestling scene? Are you just totally off the map, or stepping away from it just for your mental health, or what's going on with you?
Pretty much. I think I owe it to Derek to not be snooping around, right? You know, he doesn't need that. And so, but we talk every once in a while, and which is great. And it, you know, it's his deal now, and he has every right to do his thing. And I think it's tough when the retired coach is still around. You know, I think can be a hard thing. So I keep my distance. I get to see the wrestlers in my classes or in the hallways and stuff. Now this class is coming out. I don't know all these kids, but the one, you know, with Jacob and Cohen and all them, that they Troy, JJ, they all, you know, wrestled for me when I was still coaching, so I knew them, and that was cool. But yeah, I try to keep my distance. It's hard to be around the sport and not be a coach. I have all this stuff that I worked on for years, and it's still there in you know, the back of my head. And it's so funny. You work so hard at developing this craft, and then it just stops one day. But you still have all that stuff, you know, that inside you, but you just don't have anybody to, you know, really share it with. And
I feel like you're so young still, Coach. Like we need to get you at a tournament or something, do a little interview or a little cameo appearance, and get you out there and have you just around the scene a little bit. Are you down, or are you just still kind of in your little honeymoon stage right now?
I think probably the honeymoon stage. Yes, it's funny, and people like ask, why do you? I think you get tired of every night going to bed and thinking about it, and that's the first thing you think about every morning when you get out of bed. I mean, it becomes an obsession, right? And it runs your whole life every day, and there's only one way in my mind to do it, right? There's only one way to do it, and I knew that I was running out of energy to do it that way.
Yeah.
So I knew it was time for me to step away when I couldn't put what I thought was, you know, and it had to be, you know, 10 months out of the year, 12 months out of the year, whatever, you know, usually took August off, but yeah.
Right. And that's that's literally the grind I'm in right now. It was like, hey, can we get August? Okay, great. It's September, club starts back up around. Okay. You know, we're back to it again. It almost felt like it, you know, you didn't, but it is, you're right. I mean, the grind is forever, right? You know, when you're in it, it never stops. You're always, I mean, shoot, I'm on the phone with our coach like every day. I'm sure he's real annoyed because I'm trying to be that assistant that Dean With was, you know, for you. Right. And I think that's a role that I'd love to play. But Coach, what advice can you give to, I'm not going to say young coaches, but just coaches in general, starting a program, wanting to build something that you have built. I mean, what kind of advice do you think you can hand over?
Number one, surround yourself with really good people that will buy in, to what your vision in your dream. As a head coach, you kind of provide that, but you also have to be willing to let people have their chunk of the pie. That Dean Witt knew his value. Andy knew his value. They had a piece of the pie. It wasn't about me. They knew that how important they were. And I think as the head coach, you have to be able to make sure the people around you know that. You have to give them the space to be able to do their thing. I was probably a little bit more of a control freak when it came to practice. But I also was the expert in the room. And I knew that I had wrestled so much and had such good college coaches and spent so much time around that was my deal. But that wasn't the most important deal in the thing. What Andy and Dean did were really just as important. And I think they knew their value. And they knew that they had their space to be able to do and be them. So that's the first thing. I think the next thing is you have to have a philosophy. You have to have a philosophy when it comes to your vision of your program, what's important to you. My philosophy was I'm going to take each and every kid that wants to do this, no matter if they're 3 months or 12 months. I'm going to try to provide the best experience for them. And I'm going to try to make a place for them in this program. And I'm going to try to build a relationship. And so that was just kind of my thing. I really felt when I first started out, I felt like wrestling could really help kids that maybe needed to get attached to something, and needed the sport. And I still feel that today. So that was a big part of my philosophy. I had a philosophy for wrestling technique, like I had a philosophy, what I thought was important, what were my tenets of, like what are the things that we have to have as Lake Stevens wrestlers. You got to have good, you have to have good position. You have to have good motion. You have to be able to understand how to move when somebody puts hands on you. You have to be able to get off the bottom. You got to have a leg attack and finish. You got to be comfortable. And if you're going to attack, you have to be able to recover. And probably if I was coaching little kids now, I would start from there, recovery. I'd start with kids in on a leg. I'd start with kids in a front headlock. I'd start with kids in a go behind position, get them down underneath and get them comfortable in that position, and then move from there up to being able to grab a leg. Because grabbing a leg's easy. Anybody who's wrestled in college, it's funny, Christensen, I chatted with him on over the weekend, and I said, how do you do against he has a 3-time All-American in front of him. I said, he said, I can get to his legs. And I chuckled to myself, even though we were just texting back and forth. I thought, yeah, that's great. I remember getting to guys' legs in the room and not being able to finish. That's when it becomes really hard. So I think it makes sense to start in those uncomfortable places and get kids to realize that this is where you're probably going to end up, and you're going to end up with your head down and your arms up here and on your knees. It's not always going to be clean and sweet. And so I think, you have to have a philosophy on how you're going to do it, how you're going to coach, how you're going to present, what's important. And I always was a coach that had a practice plan, whether it be when I ran freestyle practice or, what preseason stuff. I always had a plan written down. And I always had a goal of what I wanted to achieve during that plan. And the reason I had a plan, there's a couple of reasons. My philosophy was I'm not going to waste your time. You come into my room, whether Sam Otto comes into Lake Stevens Wrestling Club and shows up that day, I'm not going to waste Sam's time. I'm going to give Sam my best, and I'm going to make sure that we're organized. And then in return, Sam's not going to waste any of my time, you know, like, and when you're organized like that, and when you have a purpose, and you know that every minute is really, every second is really important, you know that they understand that. The people that you're teaching, the people that you're coaching, they get it, they feel it in the room, and they know that, okay, this is important. I need to have my shit together here and be paying attention. I also knew, like with high school kids, they've been taught at, you know, for 6 hours, they come to wrestling practice. The last thing they want to do is be taught at in a slow, monotonous manner, and, you know, they're falling asleep. I had a coach at Oklahoma State named Tommy Chesbro, was an incredible technician. And by that time I knew I was going to be a coach. So practice was great in the fact that he taught for 45 to an hour at the beginning of every practice after we warmed up. And then he said, okay, let's go wrestle. I mean, it was terrible in that respect because you were already cooled off and you were halfway asleep. But I learned a lot. You know, I learned a ton of technique, but it was hard to get back. And the practices were 3 hours, sometimes 3.5, and they were slow, and they were, you know, they just, and you know, you have a limited amount of time with kids. You want them to be able to go home and get their homework done, and you want to respect their time and respect them because they are students. They do have, you know, a family that they need to see. So you want to make sure that you're very respectful of that too. So that's why you come to practice prepared, and you get going and you get it in. When we would have 2 practices a day, I always made sure that I cut the afternoon short because of that. And I'd do my teaching in the morning, like if we needed to teach technique because they hadn't been taught to yet. So, you know, let's say we started at 6 in the morning, I get them running for 20 minutes or so. After the run, we bring them in and we do a lot of teaching, a lot of technique in the morning because they were fresh. By the time they woke up, okay, in that 20-minute run, they woke up, we bring them in. They haven't been taught to, they haven't sat in a classroom. And then I knew that I got some really valuable teaching that I couldn't do in the afternoon. And then in the afternoon, we would cut it short, and it would be all on the go, you know, a lot of live, a lot of situations, a lot, you know, get in and get it out. So that was kind of my philosophy as far as, you know, how I ran, you know, practice and what have you.
Coach, you just dropped like a 5-minute, like seminar on me. I was dazed.
I'm ready to lace up my shoes right now.
I'm about to, I'm about to do something right now. I'm about to run through a wall.
Okay. Yeah, I've been able to talk about it for about 2 years now. So
I do want to say one thing about that though, because when I started coaching a little bit after high school, and I'm still coaching right now, you know, sometimes you walk out of a practice and you think that, you know, not having a practice plan and you did the wing it technique. You know, where you walk in and you're like, you know, I did it, and I can go in here and I can show these guys exactly what I did, and it's no problem, right? They're just going to learn from me. Sometimes those will work a little bit, but it is every single time that I came up with an organized, structured practice, it was tenfold better. Yeah, and it's exactly what you're saying. It's just like, I don't know. It just gets me fired up to get a little bit.
And here's the other thing, and this is incredibly important for young coaches. I've been on I've been an expert witness on 3 broken neck cases in wrestling. And one was my former high school coach. And all 3 of them, the one problem they didn't have is they didn't have a proof of practice. What they did in practice, they didn't have a practice plan. You not only have to have a practice plan, because there's a chance something could happen in your room, and you got to answer to that. And if you don't have something down as a record, you don't want to go to court at all. Right. You need to have something down as a record, and you need to have days where you talk about, hey, if I lift somebody off the mat, we're responsible for their safe return. You know. You know, I hate to cover your ass stuff, but you have to do it. And and then on top of it, it's good practice anyway.
Good practice. You know,
When you start to talk about, because they're going to ask you, did you actually cover this? Did you teach somebody how to return somebody safely? Right. Well, yeah, I did it. I couldn't tell you when, but I did it. you know. So yeah, I think that's an important aspect of that. But yeah, I think really, you know, when I first heard the word philosophy as a coach, you know, a young coach, I was like, oh yeah, okay. But then as I really got into it more and more, I think it became more important, and something that I look into at times as a driving force. You know, why am I doing this? 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 You know, from a structural program point of view to a technical point of view to how you're going to peak your athletes towards the end of the season. You know, all that. You have to have some kind of philosophy, an idea of how you're doing any of that.
Coach, what you just did there was invaluable. I think I've got an idea on something that we can work on together after this, because I think that there is not enough of this between each other, you know, and the coaches. It seems like some coaches want to just go off, do their own little thing. We're fine. I think there needs to be more communication between the coaches, and we need to be in this together. You know, and I think having another shoulder to lean on is great. Steve Davis with the comment. Thank you, Coach Barnes,
Steve.
Matt, Sam, Kai. I really appreciate you, Steve. Coach, as we get to the end of this podcast, it'd be remiss to kind of bring up a couple of these things that we haven't talked about. We're an hour and 30 minutes in, and I think now's the time to kind of talk about some of these things. But the MTV special, you know, how did that happen? How did that start? Was that from Chris, or how did that end up? So
I think Chris wanted to come back and his experience in Lake Stevens wrestling was really important to him. And then he had a vehicle to be able to share that, or try to share that with you know, masses. I told somebody the other day, have you ever seen all the Matt? It's me trying to starve kids. It's me starving kids and trying to get them to go to class. That's what the whole thing's about.
almost not. I mean, if you think about how it was back then as to now, you almost can't show that stuff anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly. Yeah. So,
my question to you about it, really, do you think it did? What was it good? I mean, if you had a chance to pull it back a little bit, do you think you would have, or do you think it was beneficial? I mean, how do you think it went?
I take it for what it is, you know, what it was, and I try not to analyze it too much. Yeah, you know, when he gets into the hands of the people who cut the tape, it can become anything they want it to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It makes you really understand. So here's I have a kid, Jesse, and he's struggling to make weight. He's cutting his ass off, and I bring him to the office, and I said, Jesse, this is, you know, not about who you are. You know, who you are is all these other things, and wrestling's just what you do. And he's crying, and we're having this heart-to-heart talk, and then he leaves the office, and the producer, the filmmaker, comes into my office. He goes, Coach, oh, that was so good. But I would really like to get it with some better lighting over here. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Get out of my office. I'd like to get it. Can you do it again?
Do that again. Take two.
But so yeah, it kind of gives you the idea of what reality TV is all about. But yeah, there was some things that, you know, like but it was what we did at the time, right? You know, like kids did cut weight, and we helped them with that, and they sacrificed. And I always said, you know, you didn't cut as much weight as I did. You know, and the other thing is that, you know what, didn't hurt you. You know, you had to sacrifice a little bit. You had to go. You know what it feels like to not have food. You know, how you have a little empathy for some kid that maybe doesn't have a refrigerator full of food. You know, and understand what it means like to go without. Meaning, because, you know, most of the kids I worked with didn't have to deal with that. And so kind of in that way, it was good and it was hard. And so I think that was okay. You know, like it was just the time period that we were in.
Yeah. No regrets. No regrets.
Yeah. And we did focus a lot on Stephen Walkley, you know, and we did everything we could to try to get him squared away. And, you know, people would say, well, you enabled him. And my argument would be, well, no, we gave him probably the highlight of his life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What a freaking incredible answer like to that. Like, and that's the absolute truth. And, you know, one of my favorite parts in this, and it doesn't get talked enough about because me and Sam just rewatched it back, and it's pretty powerful. Obviously, because we know you, we're. I mean, you know, I could stone's throw to.
Yeah, we look at it through a different lens than probably most folks do.
But I'll tell you what, the real big heated thing was between Steven and Ryan, and it seemed like they hated each other's guts. And then you know what? At the end of that, which they didn't show very much of, when Ryan didn't get a chance to win state, guess who was right there putting a hand on his shoulder at the very end? It was Steven. And I thought, man, this isn't highlighted very well. Like these guys are just at each other's throats, yet they are brothers. You know, they are consoling each other, and I thought that was a really powerful statement.
And they had grown up together since the time they had wrestled with each other and on the same team since the time they were 5 years old. You know, I mean, they knew
brothers bicker.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, so here's the last thing, you know, people. And it still happens, unfortunately. I heard a scenario about some people in an association we all know talk about how they didn't want to reward accolades to Lake Stevens because they had too many transfers.
Yeah.
And me and Sam talked about this today, about the transfer thing. And, you know, you guys, I think, take a real big flack about it, and especially during the tenure there. And just as Kai mentioned, you know, his family decided to do, you know, we had on Smokey McClure, who decided to transfer to Wyoming Sem. He's in the finals of Fargo. He's now wrestling at Utah Valley. You know, he probably accredit a lot to his family going to find a place for him to really grow as a wrestler, as an athlete. And I just look at it as like, I don't know why so many coaches, so many referees want to throw a lot of shade at the idea of transfers. I look at it as a coach and I said, well, what can I do to get there? You know, and then I would have called you. I'd have been like, hey, Barnes, I'm going to need some of this secret sauce that you got going on here. What is it? Instead, it seems like you guys got a lot of flack. Did you ever respond much to that? And I hate to bring it up because I respect the crap out of you, but I just feel like a lot of people gave you a lot of flack for that.
Yeah, I know. Bill didn't know come. That's true, Chris. And I think I didn't go out and recruit the kids. And I always said, you know, be careful what you wish for, whether you're coming into Lake Stevens or, you know, like you think that it's going to be this. And I would bring kids like, you know, like a Tony Kubik. I would have them in my office and I would explain, run it down. This is the way it is here. And you think you're going to come here and you're going to immediately be a state champion. That's not the way it works. You still have to do all the work, just like you would have had to do all the work when you were at Cascade. I said, so that doesn't change, you know, like and everybody thinks it's, you know, it's going to be this hunky-dory thing, and they don't realize the work that's involved in the sacrifice and all those things that you have to do. But honestly, I was just too focused on, you know, on making sure I was doing my job. So I didn't worry about what anybody said. I could care less what other people think about that. I knew the quality that I was providing. I knew that when whoever stepped in my room, or was a kid that grew up in Lake Stevens or somebody, you know, that you know, moved in, I didn't care.
Yeah, and I didn't care either. I tell you what, like as a wrestler from Everett, right across the way, like I used to hear it all the time. I'm like, why does this matter? Like, and you know what? It made me want to wrestle you guys tougher. You know, I was like, I want to go in there and wrestle these guys.
Right. I think, you know, we've had some, you know, different experiences, you know, like the twins that went, that were from Lake Stevens and then went to Arlington, their experience here wasn't great, and they probably ended their experience pretty good at Arlington, you know. So, and then kid like Hopper Pearson, even his high school coach at the time was sick of him, you know, like it was a handful, and he needed a different scenery. He needed some different scenery if he was going to end up, you know, completing his career. And he was great for us. Absolutely great. He was a great teammate. He was just starving to be in something that was a little bit bigger than himself, because when he was at Ferndale, he was the big thing. And he was also a handful, you know, a bad combination. And I think when he came to Lake Stevens, he realized he wasn't the biggest thing, and he you know, like it was refreshing for him to be, you know, just another one of the guys. And he was a great teammate.
Yeah, I think fortunately nowadays it's not as big of a deal. I remember back when I was wrestling, it was, and even before then, I think it was a bigger deal. People were just kind of up in arms about it, and I think it was just more of a jealousy thing more than the other. But
absolutely jealousy,
right?
absolutely.
It was jealousy. Like I transferred to Snohomish, and you know, half of the guests we had on this podcast, like Brandon Kaler, he made a move to find something better, and that's what you're. You know, you and your parents make that decision to find what's best for you as a wrestler, because, you know, my circumstance personally was our head coach got fired. You know, am I going to stay in this program with a biology teacher that's coaching me? Like, my path was wrestling and my academics, and I needed to find something that was better for me. And my parents helped me and make that decision for us. And to begrudge a kid for doing that, I think is wrong. You know, first and foremost. But I think that it's kind of fizzled out a little bit. I hope, you know, nowadays. But
I always knew it was a sensitive thing when, because I ran Lake Stevens Wrestling Club, and we have kids from all over the area come in, and you had to be really careful what you said. You know, like when you talk to a kid from, you know, like we had some great kids come down from Burlington, and you know, like, how's your coach? You know, that's the first thing I would say. How's coach doing it? Or you know, whoever it was. And to make sure that they know that, hey, I'm not trying to pull you out of there. And I think it's tough, because especially through club, you know, when Ron started to fade a little bit at USA, things were bound to happen. People were going to look for, you know, places where they can get their kids into a really good situation, you know. He was a once in a lifetime, you know, guy and person that had this acumen, and he also had this personality, and he was so giving, and he was so neutral, right? And just tough to find somebody like that.
Well, yeah, you have those practice partners that are in a feeder program, right? Or a freestyle club that is, you know, you have those practice partners that are together, and then you know, when that fizzles out, when stuff starts to change and all that, well, as parents and as student athletes, it's like, you know, you kind of have to have this collective effort. So, well, what's best for me and what's best for the student athlete moving forward? Because, you know, like I said, for me personally, I wasn't going to wrestle and not have any practice partners, not having the same training partners that I was going to be able to train with throughout my entire career that I spent since I was 5 years old, and then just, you know, give that all away. Like, I'm going to continue to pursue what's best for me in my career. So I
And you can tell this hit a little bit of a stiff one with Sam too, being
it does.
being a transfer state champion. Yeah. You know, it must be nice. No, Coach, I appreciate all the time that you've given us. We're almost on 2 hours. We just have some quick, fun questions that we like to kind of get into at the end here. My first quick, fun question is, do you absolutely hate getting asked about Chris Pratt at this point, or?
No, not at all. I mean, I really like Chris, and we're friends, you know, to this day. And not this past summer, the summer before, I went on a couple of golf trips with him, and so we stay in touch. And
I saw him golf with Bryson DeChambeau, I think it was. He was not too bad. He's hilarious guy, funny guy.
Really
and
good.
Then I don't know, Sam's on mute here, so I'll continue this here. But explain Berserker. How did that start? Where did that come from?
I was sitting, I used to go, when I was a young teacher, I would go into other people's classrooms of the teachers that I really liked. And there was a guy named Don Papsadero. He was our baseball coach. and he was a history teacher, and he was talking about the Viking warriors, and it was a great lesson on the berserkers, the ultimate Viking warrior, the guys who die and go to Valhalla. And so I listened to this, I wrote all the way down, and I'm like, we are going to be the berserkers, and that's how that came about.
That's pretty nice, because there ain't no berserker seagulls out there. It's like, how do you try to make that sound?
Yeah, there's got to be a way to frame that somehow, though.
Well, I'm still figuring it out myself, Coach. Go ahead, Sam.
How about one of I'm going to put you on the spot here, Coach. How about the best or most athletic wrestler that you ever coached during your tenure at Lake Stevens High School?
Stephen Walkley.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Great answer. We'll continue to put you on the spot there. Do you have a favorite team, or maybe a most memorable team to you that you just, man, that was okay. Hit us. Love it.
2009. That was probably our best team. George King. Just a whole bunch. Heinzer was on that team.
Stillwell.
Jack. Welsh. Tuber was our heavyweight. Just like it's an awesome group of guys and an awesome team. Really good.
Justin Grove, Blake LaHuke.
Yep.
That was my senior year.
Keep it up, Sam. Jeez.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sam.
That was a crew. Actually, that team, we went back to the Final Four, and we wrestled. I think one of the teams, High Point, New Jersey, they were ranked 10th at the time, and we beat them. So it was fun. That team was fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Super cool.
How about one of the funniest, goofiest wrestlers that you ever had, like the class clown, one of those guys that just always kept the room light?
Oh, Pratt, for sure. Yeah,
Pratt, really? Nice.
You take him seriously. He's constantly on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, turn it off. Yeah.
And Coach, am I reading this right? Best bottle of wine you've made? Are you a winemaker?
2000, probably I want to say the 2014 Franc. We haven't made one in a number of years, but yeah, that was probably it.
Well, I would love to get you back on the train. I'd love a nice Coach Barnes wine. We could sell it for good coin in India, I think. You're right.
I have a whole barrel of vinegar. I need to get rid of it. So
you can get rid of it over here if you'd like. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then Sam, do we got one last one there?
Yeah, I just took up fly fishing because my brother-in-law's a fly fisherman. Where's your favorite fly fishing spot in Washington?
Oh, Beckler River. Up the Beckler River. Anywhere up there is great.
Yeah. What time of year do you go out there?
We've done it in the fall. Yeah. And just because of the beauty, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Adam Aney makes a comment here. Thanks for sharing, Coach. The impact you've had on the sport is immeasurable. Hats off. Chris Feist, strap a pig head on, berserker. Okay. And the cool thing is, obviously you and Feist, two really great coaches, both ideally said the exact same thing about having a philosophy and coaching through a philosophy. I feel like that's something that we're still getting ourselves into as early head coaches, trying to find our philosophy. What is it, and those experiences that you've gained over the years, it's really great to hear. Coach, we just want to thank you so much for giving, 2 hours of your time. That is, Dave Gilbert said, "What's up, Dave? I'll see you soon." But great show with a great guest. And I really appreciate it, especially coming from Dave. You want to say anything to Dave, Coach?
Yeah, how you doing, Dave? I need my back cracked.
Nice. I need a bottle of wine. You need your back cracked. This is so we all could give to each other. But Coach, like I said, 2 hours of your time is unreal.
Thank you so much.
I would have never imagined that we would have gotten that. And I just want to tell you that we really do appreciate everything that you've done for the community. And this is just a start. It sounded like we opened up a flask from you, and it'd be nice to kind of see what continues to pour out of it as we get down the road. But again, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thanks for all you guys are doing. This is great. And I know when you've got kids watching this and everything, this is awesome. And appreciate your time and your work. guys.
Yeah, thank you. And kids, we got parents. Chris Feist's mom was in the chat. She was there. It happened. But Coach, we'll let you sign off here, and then we will get there. Tell your wife thank you for the time, and you have a wonderful day. She's right there. I knew it. And thank you guys so much. Wow. Sam, that was awesome. I can't believe we went 2 hours, and it was easy. That was easy. And you know what? We didn't really get into a lot of the coaching stuff. And that's the kind of the cool part about what we do with the podcast is, sometimes as they come on for the first time, it's just about getting to know them, just about getting to know their history and how they got to where they are. And then the real work happens. Now let's dig into the philosophy. Let's dig into it. But man, my heart is overfull with this. I think it's great. And how do you feel?
This likewise, that's a lot of times, even if, we know these folks, like Coach Barnes and I go back since I was 5 years old, I've seen them around forever. But didn't really ever get to know them. And so, these are such valuable moments for just me personally, selfishly, it's really fun. But yeah, for the whole community itself, just to listen to a legend like him, probably the most winningest coach of all time. And, an absolute legend in the state, probably the greatest coach in the state's history. It's just an honor to be able to interview somebody like that. And we're just excited to meet with him again, hopefully see him around.
Yeah, I feel, like I said, I feel blessed that it's us. I feel blessed that we're bringing these people on. I don't know. I mean, Barnes was almost in hiding, like we had mentioned, like we hadn't seen him, what was going on, and it's so great to be able to bring him on. And he has a history with both of us. We have history with him, and man, it felt really good. But for everybody tuning in, we really appreciate it. Please go give us a like, a follow, a subscribe, give us some comments, thumbs up on the videos. We saw that the Lake Stevens wrestlers were in the chat today, dudes. Thank you for commenting, and we hope you guys all have a wonderful night, and we will be back on soon.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.